Good evening. This is John Flannery, and I'm coming to you from our Halifax, Nova Scotia studio in our stateroom on board the ship. Let's start with a couple of things that I know everybody's pursuing. One is Jimmy Kimmel. He got 6.2 million eyes and ears on his show last night. He did good, is the least you can say about it. He talked about the array of people who helped and made a difference. And it's a patchwork quilt that joins us all together that can make a difference for the other public speakers we have who some may agree or disagree with, but we don't muzzle them. We don't prevent them from speaking. And so that's a very big step in the right direction. And of course, it drove Trump crazy mad. He ranted before the show about Kimmel, putting him down, slandering him in every which way, including talking about how many people were watching his show. And Jimmy, at one point during his remarks, laughed, well, look at my numbers now, 6.2 million people. So, but Trump, who knows no decorum, has no sense of right and wrong, said he was going to go after Kimmel any way he could, meaning I guess he hopes to direct the head of the FCC to do some police action, if you will. Whether or not Carr will do that remains to be seen. Now, Kimmel, I think, is part of Trump's misdirection from other things that he doesn't want to talk about, like Homan, who received a $50,000 bribe to do certain favors for businessmen, and Epstein. Day by day there are additional disclosures about this, and Trump is so petty he removed the statue of Epstein and Trump hand in hand on the mall, and nobody knows where the statue went. If this guy isn't like the gang that can't shoot straight, I don't know what he is. Now Trump has done a whole number of things, and you have to wonder if he's so dead stupid, so dead set against bad policy that he defines as bad policy. For example, it appears that helping anybody in terms of health is not among his agenda items as President of the United States. For example, among his reveries are the declaration that Tylenol, acetaminophen, is associated with birth in a bad way that prompts autism. Now, let's just look at the calendar for starters. It was the Kanner syndrome in 1943 that was the first instance of early infant autism, okay? Now, in terms of cause and effect, you have to wonder how it could be associated with Tylenol that didn't exist in 1943, didn't exist until 1955, 12 years later. And the science, according to the experts, doesn't show any adverse effect on women that is discernible, that is by inference statistically or otherwise, a cause and effect. Yet Trump goes out and repeated that don't use Tylenol, don't use Tylenol. And you have to wonder two things. One, is this to have us pay attention to something other than his other crises? And Jimmy even made a joke about that this became a major problem for Trump, and he's handling it badly every way he does it. Or is he trying to get at the company that makes Tylenol? In other words, to run down their sales for some reason. What private conversation did he have? What did he ask them to do? What did RFK Jr. ask them to do? And normally, if you did that kind of thing, you would be some sort of conspiracist. But when you consider Trump's misconduct all the time, you can't do that. You have to say, well, what are you really doing here? And another step, I mean, there's just a service plate, a buffet of terrible things this guy does. And the world is looking at him and laughing, but also pushing back. We see that in the UN and other places. But let's stay domestically. We have a resigning U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia because he was directed by the Injustice Department to find a crime against FBI Director Comey when he said he looked at the evidence and didn't find that it sustained a crime. And he has been thrown out the door for being ethical, basically, and for being a real prosecutor. and looking at the case in terms of facts and law and statutes of limitations, and he decided not to go forward. So the new U.S. attorney is going to indict Comey. Actually, the grand jury is going to indict. It's an interesting question if the grand jury will know enough about this case to refuse to indict. Very unusual for a grand jury, because they'll usually do anything that a prosecutor asks them to do, and I know this from experience. So the responsibility of the prosecutor is great. If you know you don't have a case, you're asking a grand jury that's dependent upon you to follow your advice. You're off in a land where, as a lawyer, you could have your ticket punched, and should. And perhaps there'd be disciplinary actions against you by the judge, particularly one who presides over the grand jury in Alexandria. So the new U.S. attorney is going to indict Comey. Everybody's saying it's going to be any day now, in part because the incident occurred about 5 years ago, and they're rushing because of a statute of limitations to file before that runs, unconcerned about the fact that we don't have facts and we don't have law that supports a prosecution for him giving perjured testimony before a committee of the House of Representatives. Now, the new prosecutor we have to notice is Lindsay Halligan. Lindsay was representing Trump in connection with the top secret papers that Trump took from the White House that became the subject of an indictment. Now, the interesting thing about her is that she's never been a prosecutor, and Trump has appointed her to go and be a junkyard dog on this case. And first of all, she doesn't know how to do it fairly. And secondly, if she just does what she's told, she's certainly not going to do it fairly. Trump says to Bondi, the Attorney General of the Department of Justice, that if we don't go forward with this prosecution, we will lose reputation and credit. I think the opposite is what we have here. If you're going to use the Justice Department to lift a chapter from the trial, Kafka's The Trial, or one other of these books that talk about how impossible the procedure is and what's going on, so people are willy-nilly put in danger and lose their freedom, lose their reputation, etc. So we're dealing in that level there. Now, because Holly and I are in Halifax, Nova Scotia, we were very interested to go to see and to learn about the people who died in the Titanic when it crashed. Quite a number of them came here, and they weren't repatriated as might happen today to their own countries, and so they were buried. First they tried to identify them, and they were buried here. And the stories that are told are something that itself is a lesson for us. Okay, so first of all, why would I mention this? I mention this because I think it's a great model to compare what happened with Titanic with what's happening with Trump. And not just because they have T at the beginning of the name. Consider, just imagine, here are people on an unsinkable, huge boat. Everybody's praising it and so forth. It runs up against an iceberg, and after some time it sinks, and bodies are brought to America, to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and we have other people who were older when they died, and then we have people, men, women, and children, younger. So we find these people who died in this terrible tragedy amidst fading headstones all around. And I mention that because there are headstones with very brief descriptions of who they are and what they are. Now, I think there are two parts to this that parallel maybe any significant tragedy. First of all, how do we get into it? The way we get into it is that the owner of the ship, J. Bruce Ismay, an English businessman, he decides that we don't need so many boats to help people get off the ship if something happens. So instead of 48, he has 16, number one. The second thing that happens is that there's a discussion between Ismay, and there is some doubt about these things because this is happening in 2012, but there is some doubt about whether or not Ismay said, let's speed up our travel so perhaps we'll get a record for our arrival time. These two things together became important in the demolition of the unsinkable Titanic. Now, it's also important to know that J. Bruce Ismay had an assistant. The assistant was Edward Freeman. And what we'll find is that Edward Freeman saved others up to and including giving his own life, saving others as the Titanic sunk into the water, and those who could get away did. J. Bruce Ismay depended upon his assistant to help him get off the boat when the rule was that women and children were first and men, if possible, followed. There's a great story of Astor, who was with his wife and 2 children, and he could not get in the boat with them, and he did the noble thing, and of course his wife and children got into one of the boats, and he said, "I'll see you later." Now, he's an intelligent man. He was a significant member of the business establishment. He knew what he was saying was only to be reassuring because it was not going to happen that way. So here's the 2 parts. To what extent did Ismay help create the crisis? He had some role in it, okay? Because he was the owner, and he made decisions that were, in his mind, important to competing by time, saving money, and getting additional staterooms by having fewer boats that would save the people if it struck an iceberg. So it struck an iceberg 376 miles southeast of Newfoundland on April 14th, 2012. Now, the unsinkable called for help. So how did Ismay survive when the rule was women and children first? He had a claim. There is a myth that supposedly dressed as a woman and got on a boat, and people dismissed that, and I'm in no place to counter that or admire it or not. But what we have is we have the story of 2 men. We have the story of Ismay, and we have the story of Freeman. Ismay claims he found a sea collapsible boat, the last boat on the starboard side, and he claimed there were no others who needed to get in the boat who were present, and as there were no women or children, he jumped in. Another man, William Carter, did as well. When he did it, he abandoned his wife and children, and as he survived, they had litigation years later, and she wanted a divorce for his misconduct. His wife was resourceful, and her and the children survived. Now, London called our boy Ismay a coward. There were public hearings, and as a result of the public hearings, Ismay basically had a very solitary life. How is this like Trump or anybody in this situation? If the right decisions had been made at the outset about not testing new engines and so forth, trying to make a speed record, and if the required number of boats were kept to save the passengers should anything like this iceberg occur, then that crisis could have been avoided, but it wasn't. So then the second part of it is, well, let me go back a second. The first part says to us, what does Trump do that's wrong? Who does he put at risk? And how many crises? And we can talk about them. We could talk about those who are leaving the country, women, how he mistreats them, us on the world stage, the salad bowl of words that Trump spoke the other day at the UN. It goes on and on and on. So he's creating mini and major problems all the time. Not that that the Titanic was a small one by any stretch of the imagination. So then the problem has happened and the emergency occurs. So what tells us the character of people in that situation? In the case of Ismay, since he contributed and helped it happen, what does he do to redeem himself? What would Trump do to redeem himself for all of his bad decisions? And the answer is that we have Ismay cheats and gets off the ship, gets off the Titanic, and lives to fight another day. But he's miserable. There are lawsuits. He has to leave his company, but he has the resources to live to a decent age in mid-70s. And all along the way, people are on his case, you might say, and justified so. Trump is the same kind of person. He knows what to do. He confesses to journalists and others what he's going to do. He brags he's going to do the wrong thing, and then he does the wrong thing. So crisis caused by an individual, okay? Reaction, what do you do in that situation to minimize the dangers that you've caused? And then finally, what do you personally do? To what extent do you go to own the error? No question Captain Smith owned it. He went down with the ship. No question that Ismay's assistant, he earned it. He went down with the ship. But Ismay did not. There's a journalist, poet, Ben Hecht, and let me give you a quote from his poem on the subject. The captain's grave was his bridge and brave. He earned his seaman's pay. To hold your place in the ghastly face of death on the sea at night is a seaman's job, but to flee with the mob is an owner's noble right. The last part sums up Trump. The owner's noble rights. He's not noble, so he shouldn't get a Nobel Prize. He's not a man of peace, so he should be treated as if he's a warrior, incompetent at best. He doesn't provide for the civilization of America and doesn't give a damn that he doesn't. These are our issues. I feel the vectors of force are turning against Trump. The story with, Napoleon was, he said that while he was winning and while he was doing what he was doing, nothing could stop him. But when he lost that moment, a feather could bring him down. We're not yet at the feather stage, but we're going to bring Trump down. Trump is going to bring himself down. He's going to do so many things so wrong against so much law and so many people, causing so much hurt. And the pushback has already started with some of the Republicans on this First Amendment question. There will be others. I don't see that for example, the indictment with Comey lasts very long once a judge looks at this and says, hey, I understand another prosecutor looked at it, said there was no evidence. You tell me, in chambers, in secret, where the hell this case is. And then the more embarrassing thing would be that the grand jury hears enough, asks enough questions, and does what it's done, what another grand jury in D.C. has done, and says, oh, we can't approve this. And so that's the nub of that. And then all his mispronouncements about what he's going to do with in the Mideast, what he's going to do with Ukraine, how he's going to handle Russia and so forth. He is scattered. He is himself functioning in the chaos he created, and it's caught him. And the people are finding order and paths to fight him back. Here's the dirty secret. This still is going to be suspenseful. We won't know until it happens that we've won. But when we do, this guy is going to go down like nobody else in American history. And we can all be part of that, just as we were helping Kimmel and just as we are helping others in other situations. So that's what I got to say. And I'm on this cruise. And if I get a chance, I'll tell you other things that I've observed as we go along. All the best. Bye-bye.